questions or comments during the presentation, please then type them into the Zoom chat. We have Lauren Prue, who is absolutely phenomenal, behind the scenes kind of master that makes sure that we are on top of things and can answer at least bring that to Marta's attention. And then if there's any other questions specifically, make sure that we'll give you a chance at the end to ask questions as well. So we'll take questions as it comes into the chat box and it's appropriate, and then we'll also have time afterwards. So without the live transcript is also available for those of you who like to read along with us, and make sure that that option is available to you down on the Zoom toolbar where it says show captions. So you can utilize that. And without further delay, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Marta Rodriguez Pozo, so that you can truly understand and see the tools that Learning Ally has to offer. Go ahead, all yours, Marta.
Thank you so much, Tara. Hi, everybody. It's nice to see everyone here. I'm seeing some names that I know I definitely recognize. So it's wonderful that you're able to be here and share in this presentation with me. I'm going to go ahead and just let you know that this is a very casual environment. My objective is for you to get a better understanding of what we can do for you. You are more than welcome to ask questions. If you need something clarified, please feel free to ask me to clarify. If there's something very specific to your school district, you can also send me an email, schedule some time on my calendar using my Calendly link, which I can share with you later on in the end. And I am more than happy to do any kind of one-on-one that you would like to if you need any more assistance. That being said, we are also a discretionary project, and we are very lucky to have many, many supporting discretionary projects that we work with here in the state of Florida so that we can do the best that we can to support the students in the state of Florida. We always begin with our little Learning Ally spiel about the fact that here in the state of Florida, we want to just make sure that all the materials we're using have met those standards for Florida requirement for instructional materials. So normally I would be here with my partner in crime, as I like to call her, Simone Smith, which some of you may already be familiar with. Simone unfortunately had a situation that she needed to take care of, which thankfully was taken care of. However, it made for a very long night last night. So she will not be with us today. But if she happens to be for your district, which I think I saw St. Lucie up there, I know she talks to St. Lucie quite frequently. She would be the person that you can contact. The great part is we do work in tandem. So if there's ever a time that you don't reach her and you have an emergency, please feel free to reach out to me. And we're both first initial, last name at learningally.org. A little bit about me. I've been in education over 30 years. I was a classroom teacher for about 8 years. I was a school administrator for about 19 years. I then started working with a national assessment company, working with schools' strategic plans across the U.S., looking at their data, their assessment data specifically, and how that could help them. I've done SACS accreditations across the state of Florida and worked with different schools through that. And then COVID hit, travel changed quite a bit. And I decided it would probably be best to just stay in the state of Florida instead of traveling across the nation. So then I found this position with Learning Ally, and I have been incredibly lucky because my why as a educator who also has dyslexia has been really working to help students who have different disabilities, some of which may be diagnosed, some of which may not be diagnosed. I, for example, it was the 80s. So I, for example, did not get diagnosed until 1989 when I was in college. And I was diagnosed by a college professor. Two of my professors tested me, diagnosed me, and then said, okay, so now you know what you have. Good luck, because nobody knew what to do. I wish I could say things have changed immensely, but I can tell you, as the mother of a dyslexic, my daughter, who is now 23, did not get extended time on SAT or ACTs until the year 2017 because it was not considered a disability that would warrant extended time through College Board. So haven't been able to make a ton of progress, but slowly but surely we are changing that. Any questions, any comments so far? Please feel free to jump in and say something if you'd like. So let me tell you a little bit about Learning Ally. As you read along the screen, we actually started because Auntie MacDonald in 1948 came back from the war and said, I have all these soldiers, and as a nurse, I know that they have conditions where they're not going to be able to read. It might have been a physical disability, or it might have been, something else, loss of an eye, for example. And so she decided, I've got to do something to help these soldiers. And she started recording herself in the New York City Public Library. So she just felt like it was important. She recorded herself on vinyl so that this group of men could then go ahead and read, or at least listen to what they couldn't read, whether it was magazines or textbooks that could help them get a new career. So from there, we realized, you know what, this could be for a lot more people. And it just expanded, eventually going through the tech conversion into tape and then CD. And now we are fully online where students can access over 80,000 books. If you're just joining us and you haven't had the opportunity to put your name and your county in the chat, I know that that's something that we've been asking for, along with what you do in your particular county. So here's a little icebreaker that we're going to use the chat for. When you see the words, I want you to tell me in the chat what we're talking about. So for example, the first one is already open. It says melts in your mouth, not in your hands. What are we talking about? I see some people mouthing it already. They know exactly what we're talking about. Oh, I see Jennifer put in M&Ms. Yep. That's exactly what we're talking about. So now for the second one, I'm going to uncover it. You're going to type it in, but do not hit the enter button until I ask everybody to hit the enter button, please. I'm loving it. Go ahead and type, and then in a moment, I'm going to have everybody hit enter together. I think we might be ready. Go ahead and hit enter. Yep. McDonald's or Mickey D's. All right, let's do the next one. The quicker picker-upper. I love how I say it and everybody's like, oh, I know what this is. All those bounties are correct. All right, number 4. Taste the rainbow. I've got to get harder questions up here. Skittles is taste the rainbow. All right, last one. Give me a break. Give me a break. Extra points if you could sing the rest of it. Nobody wants to go off mute and sing the rest
Break
of
me
it.
a piece of that Kit Kat bar.
Good job. That's exactly it. So, but my point in this activity, aside from the fact that I think it's fun, is the fact of think about how much of these things we know. Like we don't even have to see the commercial. We can just hear, give me a break, give me a break. And you know that it's break me off a piece of that Kit Kat bar. That is the power of catchy commercial jingles. And it's also the power of hearing. So when we talk about the power of hearing, we're going to talk about the benefits of reading aloud as well. I know with my own children, especially with both of them loved it. I have two girls, 26 and 23, and they both absolutely loved it. But for the younger one, because of her dyslexia, it was just always so much easier for me to read to her, and it really helps you create like almost a bond sometimes. It also helps you start building those foundational skills, especially if they can see how you're sounding things out. Then think about how it helps children see themselves in stories and how it can really create like a shared connection through the experience, especially as teachers when we start talking about, well, did this ever happen to you? Did you ever have a magic beanstalk? What do you think about this? Or all of those things that you start asking students when you are having them listen to stories. Now we're going to talk a little bit about Scarborough's rope, which I'm sure you guys are going to see 1,001 times this year. Our objective as educators is to take those kids, whether they are Gen Pop or whether they are ESC or whether they haven't been diagnosed with anything yet, and make them become skilled readers. So skilled reading is fluent execution and coordination of word recognition and language comprehension. So in other words, they've got to be able to read things quickly without having to stumble through words. So they have to recognize them. And then they have to be able to understand what there is trying to be said about a particular item in that paragraph or in that sentence. So we look at this bottom part of the rope that talks a lot about phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. For some of our kids, sight recognition may not be a possibility. I can tell you that I am 53 years old and I can still tell you that my very first bank account PIN code was 8925. Because in my mind, I constantly reverse numbers. So I had to create a rhyme that said in 1989, I was 25 in order to remember what that bank account code was. I mean, and that was eons ago, and I still remember that code. So there has to be some way of connecting those things sometimes, because if you're not seeing the right things, if you're looking at a word and instead of seeing READ for read, you see RADE, you may think it's raid. So think about all of that work that goes into reading. When our kids, whether they're young or whether they're older kids, are working over here, and this is not strong. For example, if you have a 16-year-old that's trying to decode, they're going to spend all of their time decoding. They're not really going to be reading for comprehension. I know for me, sometimes I have to read things twice just to make sure I understood, especially if it's stuff, more academic things for education. I have to go back and, oh, wait, let me reread that one more time just to make sure that I'm getting it. So best practice is to have our kids read it 3 times. I'm not sure about your experiences, but I know even just as a mom, getting my girls to read something 3 times, like getting them to read it once, was hard enough, and those are my children. So sometimes sometimes it's better in the classroom because those kids don't fight us as much at times. But think about getting the kids to read something 3 times when they're already having issues reading. The whole point in the Scarborough's rope is that if we cannot get our kids to do this down here, we're never going to move them up here. And we're not going to get to that goal of skilled reader. Forget liking reading. They're not even, going to be skilled at reading. So let's talk about those students, which students would fall into these categories. Well, we know that if a student has an IEP or a 504, they definitely fall into these categories, and we can definitely give them access to Learning Ally. We've also been talking, however, about, and we've done this a lot with our liaisons in the state, because Learning Ally is for anyone that has blind visual impairment, or has some kind of physical disability, or has a reading deficiency. I want you to think of the definition for reading fluency in our third graders and up. So right now, because it's the beginning of the year, we'd be talking about our fourth graders. You're going to have assessment information on those kids. You're going to know how many of them are level ones, and you're going to know how many of them are level twos. Let's look at the definition. Reads primarily in 2-word phrases. And for level 1, reads primarily word by word. Those are kids that are more than likely going to have decoding issues. I'm sure they have reading fluency issues because they can only read in 2 to 3-word sentences. So those are students that sometimes fall through the cracks because they don't have a diagnosis yet. But we know as teachers that there's a difficulty. Many times it's that conversation in the faculty room. Jonathan's really smart and he's in my class, and man, he can remember everything I say and just drop it in whenever we're talking. But the minute I have him read something, I have to tell him 3 or 4 times. We've all had a Jonathan like that. So those are the kids we're talking about, where when they have to read on their own, they may not be really getting all of the comprehension that they need to get. For those children who are younger than 3rd grade or 3rd grade down, who do not have their assessment yet, think about that FLDOE definition of substantial reading deficiency criteria. And that is what I would use to decide whether or not a student should be using Learning Ally as an assistance. Now think about intervention standards. So we have on the left the different FLDOE intervention standards, and all of the information that I have up here comes from the Florida Department of Ed ELA standards and benchmark books, the best standards and benchmark books. So I like to joke that it's like our blue Bible in education. So here we have on the left-hand side, we have the need for phonological awareness, phonics and word analysis, encoding, fluency, and those are intervention strategies for our 6th through 12th graders. Over on the right, we have Learning Ally and how you can help each of those interventions that we're talking about. Also think about, again, that student who needs to read this 3 times, that we can't necessarily get them to read it 3 times. I would be really excited if I could get them to read it once, usually. In the classroom, we don't have time to read this to our kids 3 times. We're told that best practice is to have a check-in with each one of our students on a weekly basis. But then we have kids in the class that can't read on their own, so we have to read out loud to them. So sometimes we may send the student to the ESE teacher to read so that my other kids can read independently. I want you to think outside the box of how we can leverage Learning Ally in the Gen Pop classroom. I have Jonathan again. I love picking on Jonathan, and he knows I pick on him. He's 37 years old and he's married and with kids, but he knows I use his name frequently. I have Jonathan in my class, and he needs Learning Ally because he has a big deficiency in his reading, and he is eligible for Learning Ally. I have a bookcase in Learning Ally as a teacher. Jonathan has his bookcase in Learning Ally as a student. As a teacher, I can project the book on the board through my Learning Ally bookcase. I'm going to sit Jonathan closest to the speakers. I'm going to have everybody sit there with their book in their hand. I'm creating an inclusive classroom. I'm normalizing audiobooks so nobody thinks it's something different. It's really just like podcasting, like listening to a podcast. And then I'm differentiating instruction for Jonathan. But at the same time, I'm giving myself 15 minutes to walk around the room while the system is reading to all of the students in the class. So I can do a check-in around the room. So now that I've leveraged Learning Ally in my classroom, when I send Jonathan to the ESE teacher or to the reading coach, they can focus on comprehension of what they just read. Maybe the ESE teacher wants to do that second reading with Jonathan. So we can really try to get the biggest bang for our buck when we have these students and when we're implementing these interventions. I'm going to stop real quick, see if I have any questions, if I've missed anything in the chat.
There is a quick question from Angelia, who says, I'd love to have a copy of slides to share with my teachers of struggling readers. Any idea when we'll have our hands on those?
I'm hoping that everybody was able to put their information in the chat. I'm trying to see, I'm hoping also that Tara, you guys can send me as soon as possible the emails of everyone who's here, and then I can turn those around and send them out as a PDF.
Okay, sounds great. Thank you. If anyone is opposed for Marta to have your email, please private message me so that you don't get, your information sent to her. So that is definitely.
Or, you know what? Or if it's even easier, if they just want to put their name and email in the chat, I'll do a copy, paste, and capture it from there. And that way we don't have to worry about you sending us the information.
Yeah. So.
Right. So think about all the times when your students are reading, and we've broken this down into elementary, middle, and high school. I love showing this because it shows people how much our kids read on the elementary level. And it's all day, every day, constantly, small groups, big groups, individually. So these are all opportunities where a student could feel a little bit more independent and do some reading on their own. So I want you to really have a good description of exactly what Learning Ally can provide. So we are through the Learning Through Listening grant. And as I said before, we are a discretionary grant. The monies come from the general fund, and we do have human read audiobooks. So we try to take the time to find someone that sounds like the character in the book, so that way the students can almost feel like they really are talking to that person. There are, I think we're at about 86,000 titles. I know we're over 80. They won't change that number till we hit a bigger number, but I want to say that we're over 86,000 titles. We do have a tab for instructional materials that are Florida specific. Some best titles that we've been able to have recorded in the last year are there, and the textbooks are there. And I'll show you that when we get into the system. We also have library management, curation, or capabilities where there can be age ranges and age appropriate filters set up. Students can go in and modify the audio and visual playback. Obviously, they can follow along with the text highlighting, but they can make changes to the text highlighting. They can make changes to how much white space they see on the screen, which for some of our kids, when they see too many words, it can be overwhelming. Some of the kids just need bigger words. For some of us, I know for myself with my dyslexia, there's some colors that I just lose letters more than other colors. Blue highlight, for example, does not work well for me. And then the great thing about this is that once a student downloads the book onto their device, whether it's a cell phone or an iPad, they do not need internet access to be able to read. So in our smaller communities where there's limited access or where internet may be spotty, it's going to make it a little bit easier for those students who have those barriers to get past those barriers and to still be able to read like our other students who may not have those barriers. So again, over here on the side, this is where we're talking about those eligibilities. So as you see, we have reading deficits, blind visual impairment, or physical disabilities. I also have, and I'm going to open it up real quick. Let me move it over here so it's on your way. I have a 2-pager that I'm going to share in the chat. And on the back page of that document, you're going to see a lot more information about reading deficits and about, how and who can go in and make these decisions. Because the reality is, again, Jonathan, for example, when I'm in that faculty room talking about him, he may not have an IEP. I may have a teacher that comes up to me and says, well, it kind of sounds like, Jonathan may have some kind of reading deficit. Have you tried starting MTSS with him? So we have those students that are not diagnosed, but we know that there's something that they may need help with. So think about the MTSS or the RTI process and how we need to have that baseline data. Not everyone can have UPAR, but maybe we can use Learning Ally as a substitute, have them read independently, have them answer comprehension questions, and then have them read in Learning Ally and answer comprehension questions and see where the differences are. One of the things that we've started doing is if you go into Chat GPT, for example, you can type in, please, you don't have to say please because it's AI, but you can type in, give me 20 comprehension questions for chapter 1 of Esperanza Rising. And Chat GPT will spit out 20 comprehension questions for you. So that's something that you can leverage as a classroom teacher also, or as a teacher that has many students that you need to help, to give you kind of an idea without you having to come up with all these different questions. Any comments so far that I need to stop and answer? All right, so we're good. So when we talk about who gets to determine that eligibility, that's going to be case by case by school, because we all have had different experiences. And sometimes we have an administrator that says, nope, we're going to have a SIP meeting. We're all going to have a conversation about each and every kid that you're worried about. We're going to figure out what's going to work for them. We're going to figure out what's not going to work for them. And then you have some in-between administrators, and then you have another administrator that may have a very large population and says, listen, you're the specialist. When we meet once a week, fill me in on what's going on. So you do have that lots of variation. So I would always have that conversation with my school administrator and see where they land on how do we want to take care of these students in our school environment. You can go in and you can give eligibility. Your classroom teachers, if they're in there, they can give eligibility. In some districts, they have students have to get marked with eligibility in the SSO system so that they get access only if they have that mark. So everyone's going to do this differently. That's why it's so important to have those conversations. Now let's go back to that blue book. We're thinking about our ELA best standards. And these are one of the things that we have to make sure that we're hitting all of those benchmarks and those standards when we're working with our kiddos. So I have for you an example of where the wild things are, just because that's one of my favorite books. And so we have here these two standards and then these two standards. So being able to describe the main character in the setting, explaining the roles, retelling the text orally, comparing and contrasting the characters. So this really lends itself well with the different monsters to how you can talk about, well, what do they look like? So when we go in to read the story, we're going to see that we have, our little friend who has decided that he's just going to be a monster. But what does this look like for our students when they're going in? I'm going to make sure I'm sharing my audio. There we go. Oop.
Where the Wild Things Are. Story and pictures by Maurice Sendak. The night Max wore his wolf suit and made mischief of one kind and another. His mother called him Wild Thing.
So the first thing I want to talk about is I know when my kids were little, if I had to go out of town, they would get so upset because they didn't want to do reading time with their dad. He's like, no, mom, he just reads. He doesn't do the voices. He needs to do the voices, mommy. So you can hear that the author is excited and is trying to do the voices to get the kids excited about the story. I want you to see how over here on the bottom right, that's where my tools are. And the great thing about this is, as teachers, we have so much on our plate that we may forget that, but you're inevitably going to have that one student in your class that says, Miss, no, that's not how you do it. You do it like this. So if you forget how to use the tools, don't worry about it. There's going to be one kid that's going to remind you exactly how to use them. You're going to click on those gears and you'll see that there are two functions there. There's playback and there's text. So I just want you to notice what we pick when we go through in the video and do different things to the text.
And Max said, "I'll eat you up." So he was sent to bed without eating anything. That very night in Max's room, a forest grew. And grew, and grew, and grew.
So far, I've been able to change the size of the font. That's gotten much bigger. And we've also created a little bit more spacing. Now you can create spacing between letters because there are some students that may need that spacing between letters. You can also create spacing on the page.
Until his ceiling hung with vines, and the walls became the world all around. And an ocean tumbled by with a private boat for Max, and he sailed off through night and day, and in and out of weeks, and almost over a year, to where the wild things are. And when he came to the place where the wild things are, they roared their terrible roars and gnashed their terrible teeth. Where the wild things are, they and
So now we weren't quite sure what gnashed meant. So we double clicked on the word gnashed and we have a little dictionary that pops up. What we have requested from our team is that they figure out how to make that dictionary verbal so that it reads it to the kids. They say we ask a little too much, but you know what? If you don't ask, you never get a yes. So we try to ask. It is on there. It's not a major priority because they are working with library management still, but that is one of the requests that we've heard. So the dictionary comes up. What you're going to see is that word, now that they've clicked on that word's going to be highlighted throughout the text. And there also is going to be a space, and you'll notice I'll click down here at some point where you're going to be able to go in and see the words that the kids have clicked on to see what the definitions are. So there's my little Post-it note that's never going to fall out of this book. I put
when he came to the place and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws.
So there's gnashed. So from this point, you can send this in an email. I always tell teachers, you don't want the kids emailing you every 5 minutes. So what I would do if it was my classroom, I would just have the kids right mouse click and highlight all the words, dump them into a Word document. They could print them, or they can email it as one document, or they could just keep them. Think about, again, outside the box. What are some of the things that we could do with this? Well, as teachers, we work really hard. So I read the book and I create this whole vocabulary list that I'm going to teach the kids, and I have them write down every word and we go over every word. And sometimes they still don't know every word. What about me having them go in And it's a challenge. I have my vocab list. Now you have to come up with your vocab list. And let's see how many words you found that I have on my list. And we're going to create one big list for the whole class. You won't have to memorize everything on the list, but it'll be one big class list. You can really find out a lot about how much prior knowledge your students have by looking at what vocab words they're asking for definitions of. So that could be a great tool for you to use to test that prior knowledge. It also helps them to engage more because it's not just you passively giving them the information and them passively, well, you would be active, but them passively taking it in. It's them being part of that. And you can always, again, make that a journey where it's a competition and you can make sure that they know the words you really want them to know, but at the same time, really engage them.
Max said, "Be still!" and tamed them with a magic trick.
So those are all the things that you're going to see. And as you see here, this is my personal bookshelf. So your students will have one that looks like this with their name on it, but you will have one that looks like this with your name on it as well. And Isa, I totally agree. I wish that was something that we could do also. How do your kids access Learning Ally so that they could do all of these amazing things? We have an app, but a lot of your schools have done integration. So you should be able to go in through Clever, through ClassLink, and find our icon in there. If your district is not integrated, then we can always go in through the web portal and you can put in your student information. I strongly suggest if you are at a district that is not integrated, this will make your life much easier. As I tell our district leaders, and I know some of you here are district leaders, what we want is to facilitate the usage for the teachers as well as the students. So if as an ESE teacher or if as a gen ed teacher, I'm going to have to go in and type in all of my kids' information, it may not be consistent. Plus, I may have a kid today that's gone tomorrow. I may have a kid that today I had 45 minutes to actually put in all their names, and 2 weeks from now, I get another kid that needs Learning Ally. So the great part about integration is that there's a 24-hour sync that happens on the daily. And what it does is anyone that needs to be moved out of the system from your particular school gets automatically moved out. Anyone that needs to be pushed in gets pushed in. That sync allows us to have the most updated information. It also allows for there to be consistency, like we're all using the school district ID for each of our kids, not the lunch ID or this other ID. We're using the specific school district ID. So if that student moves somewhere else, this will still be available to them through that student number. Now I want to jump in the portal because I would love for you guys to be hands-on, but I know it's difficult when you've got one screen. There have been a few changes in our system. So normally when you log in, you're going to go right in here to manage students. So the difference is this has been streamlined so that not every kid is here anymore. What you'll see is many search tools instead. So you want to pick your particular school district and your particular school if you have multiple, and then you can do a search and you're going to get all of these kids show up. You can even sort by grade if you want a smaller list. A few things that I want you to be aware of. Over here on the right, super, super simple. Plus sign adds them to your dashboard. Minus sign takes them away from your dashboard. So what is my dashboard? It's kind of like your grade book. So you're not looking at every single kid that's on there. You're looking at just your kids that are eligible. Now you'll notice all of these kids say eligible. We can filter by status and look at our pending eligibility students. because it could be that we just did an integration and none of my kids have eligibility. So what you will see if a student does not have their eligibility yet, there's going to be a piece of paper with a little triangle, and very simple. I'm going to click on select, and then I choose the eligibility and I click save. My suggestion is go through and do the eligibility first, and then you can add the student by pressing the plus. And if you make a mistake, it's no big deal. Just click that minus. So if I press the plus, they're going to be in my particular grade book. If I click the minus, they're out and in the general grade book. So I always say that this is kind of like that beginning of the year list that we give to our teachers, and they look through it and they're like, oh, this one's not one of mine. We need to move them out, that type of thing. And then we give everybody the dashboard or their grade book with, okay, this is your particular roster and it's just your kids. So that's what you're going to find in here is just your roster. So in this case, I only have one student right now. If I want to see what Harriet is reading, I just click on Harriet's name and I can see what books Harriet may have, or I can even browse audiobooks and assign her one. So Harriet's information should all be here. I can even take books off of her bookshelf if I wanted to take books off her bookshelf. We're going to slide over resources. There are a ton of in there, so I'm not going to go over that. We're going to look at browse audiobooks first. So some of the questions that come up at times is, well, what books are available? We have the capability, and I'm going to show this now that I'm on the right page. We have the capability as a school district to go in and to create grade bands and age-appropriate bands. So most of our school districts will set those the same. In this case, they're different. I set them a little different, but most school districts will set them as my lower grades are 1 to 5 and my age-appropriate filters are 1 to 5. That will greatly limit what your students have access to in the system in terms of, no, they cannot read a high school book. They will be able to access a book from 1st through 5th grade. Now, if I have a 5th grader that needs to access a 6th grade book, my recommendation is always that, that be something that maybe is done in writing so that the parents are okay with that happening. And a student can make a request, but they would have to send a request through the system asking the teacher for access to that book. They can see the title of the book, but they cannot browse the book or download the book without permission. So that is one step that we've been able to curate the library. So there are scenarios where we need to make sure that the book isn't even seen. So in those scenarios, we've given you guys the ability to go in and to hide a book. It does not hide it from the teacher, but it hides it from all of the students. So as a teacher, I will go in and I will see this little red saying that talks about your administrator has blocked this text from being found independently by students in your school. Would you like to continue? And I have a little blurb down here about communication. It is highly important that there be very fluid communication between administrators, library media specialists, and the classroom teachers, because there may be books that have that because maybe in another school in the district, there was a problem with that book, which is good to know. Maybe your stakeholders haven't heard about it yet, or maybe your stakeholders don't have a problem with it. So you can kind of use the system however it works best for your particular stakeholders. There may be some parents that say, no, I want my child to read a particular book. And like I tell the kids, if that's a request, I have no problem giving you access to that book. Just have mom or dad send me an email. Some school districts have created permission slips that say, yes, my child is allowed to read this book. It can even be probably the same permission slip that you may have in your classroom, in your library at the school. So you want to make sure that you have that consistency in the conversations between yourself and all the administrators and all the teachers and the media specialists as well, because we all want to be on the same page to support one another through this. So this is one of the ways that many districts have been able to support our teachers in making sure that we are doing our part in what we need to do.
Marta, we do have a question. If
Sure.
a raised hand, Mark. So go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you. Hi. I would just wanted to back up for a second and make sure I understood who has access in changing those parameters, such as the editing the grade bands, and then hiding books from students' views. Did you say that educator level people have that ability, or is that something that is set by somebody working in my district office for the whole district?
So library management is a permission that needs to be given, just like data manager. So if your school district decides, you know what, we're going to have this particular person be the person who's doing it.
And that's called
then,
library management?
Correct. In the system, it's called library management. And in a minute, I can even show you what it looks like for that person. Okay. And so what that's going to do is give the opportunity to maybe have and every district does it different. I was joking before, we have 82 districts. If you look at the lab schools, which means we have 82 different ways of doing this. It's fun for me and Simone. It's just whatever works for your stakeholders. In some districts, I've had the ESC coordinator, the district level coordinator go in, and she's been like, nope, I already talked to library manager. I already talked to the media specialist. They gave me a list. I've gone in, I've taken care of it. We're good. And we're just constantly communicating with each other. And then I've had other school districts where, the AT person has done it. I just had a school district that I met with 2 days ago, Thursday of last week, where I sat on here with the library media director or assistant director, and we just worked through it together. And I'm like, okay, click here. Okay, click here. Okay, click here. And he really built up that muscle memory. So he knew exactly how to do this. And we took care of a couple of books, and he's like, this is great. I can do the rest of them on my own. So whatever works for your school district is what we're willing to assist with.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. The great thing is also everything in the system is noted. So if someone else goes in and makes a change to the library filters, you will know who did it and when they did it. So that is something that, it tells you exactly on there what the filters are, who created the filters, when they created the filters.
Any other questions for Marta? Any other questions in the room? Sorry, Marta, I didn't mean to cut.
That's okay.
This is Jennifer Carey. I do have a question. So as part of the House Bill 1069, we have to let the parents know what books their children are being exposed to. And so even if our head media specialist went on Learning Ally and took off all the books that our district said weren't approved, how are the individual parents notified of what books their student has access to or are in like their own personal library?
So the way that we have been able to mitigate that is just by telling the parents they're welcome to go in and look at the site and, go through all the books. I would definitely ask them to go through their students access, because you guys are going to go in and set up the parameters, and so it could be that I see a book, like maybe I see Dogman and I click on Dogman. If your district has created a parameter for Dogman, I may see the book, but that doesn't necessarily mean I can access the book. So it may be something from the school district's perspective to say that we've gone in and we've been able to align the library in a similar way as our physical library is aligned, or but I would always welcome parents to go in and to just look at the website and see, what's on there. And also it's great for parents to even have their kids read out loud next to them. It'll help support that. We do not have a list per se. One of the requests that we've received from some school districts is to create a curation where it's only Florida titles that have been approved. And that's something that we are in conversation about. But I don't know, some school districts are okay with limiting that self-selection. Some school districts are not, they would prefer not to limit that self-selection. So again, it really just depends on what your school district feels comfortable with.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So as we go through, I want you to notice where I'm clicking, it says curriculum. In curriculum, there's a little box that says Florida instructional materials. That's where you're going to find best titles that were recorded last year. And that's also where we're going to find the textbooks. So this doesn't mean that these are the only books in here that are Florida books. It just means that this is where the textbooks are and the specific titles that were requested last year. There are some titles on here that were not requested by the state of Florida, but were requested by someone else. Another comment that we've made to our people and our tech people is there a way to maybe just make sure that everything is in that Florida tab, just so that it facilitates it for our educators, And I swear, I think they must think that we think Florida is the only state that they deal with, because we're always asking them, well, can you please do this for our teachers? So they try to create that balance. But since HB 1467 last year, they have been able to do a good number of things already. And it's all been due to the different conversations that we've had with people in the state and their suggestions. Now, Juana, you had a question about who gets this access? I'm going to skip manage audiobooks for one quick second. If I go over here to my account, you see how my name is there and it says manage library filters as well. So when I'm going to work on the filters, I would click in there, and this is where all of my filters are going to show up. And anything that I've filtered will also show up here. So if I have a request that came in from a student, it'll show up here. It'll show me the name of the book that the student is requesting, the name of the student, the grade the book is in, the publisher's suggestion for the grade. And then I get a little button. There's two buttons. One says approve and one says deny. And I can make the choice whether to approve or deny. And that also gets recorded just like age appropriateness. So you can see who gave access or who denied access to the book. So we're going to click on that manage books part, because once I've gone through and I've browsed through the books, I can choose to put a book into my bookcase, or I can choose to go ahead and just send them all out to the students. So you can see that there are different books that are already in here for me to review. If I want to read a particular book, I can just click on read now. And that's going to take me to my bookcase. When your students log in, this is what they're going to see. They're going to see their bookcase. And so in my past life, I was a 7th grade teacher, and 7th grade has many, many unique hygiene tools that they don't necessarily use. So their hygiene's a little different. So I had my bookcase behind my desk, and then I had their bookcase across the room. So yes, you have your own sanitizer over there, your tissues are over there, your stapler, everything. Please use the sanitizer before you use the stapler, that type of thing. But I had my own stuff behind my desk. It is the same exact concept with a digital library. I have my bookcase and they have their bookcase. This facilitates me being able to share a book with my entire class when I have a student that is eligible in that class. So it gives me that opportunity to show this on the screen, sit my student who needs this closest to the speakers, and have them, give them the ability to have that differentiated instruction. Again, my whole class is listening to it. I'm walking around the room doing that check-in that we talked about, that it is as I said before, considered best practice, but we don't necessarily have time for. So this gives you a little bit of time to be able to do that. Now, what you're going to notice on the bookshelf is I have one book up here because this is what I'm currently reading. And then down here, I have several other books. Some of them have the blue arrow that points to the right. That means that book has been downloaded, and I can just click on it and start reading it whenever I want. This book over here has not been downloaded along with these down here. So if I want to download a book, I just click that icon. You're going to hear ding, a little bell. Then you're going to see that it's working. And then when it's done, you're going to hear ding again with a bell again. When I click on my book, you can see that this one is one that I've already gone in and have started using different tools for it. For some students, that high contrast works better. So you can always have them do a black background, or you can give them the ability to do it however they feel more comfortable doing. You'll see here that there's a little dotted line. That little dotted blue line is because I bookmarked this page, because there's something on this page that I really want to talk to my teacher about, and maybe get a little bit more information about. As we said before, you can come down here and you can see what different items I've already chosen that I don't know the definition of. Hairpins, mesquite, smudge, and valise. And it's as easy as right mouse click, highlighting all of that information, and then just right mouse click, copy it and paste it right into a Word document. And you could have your students turn it in like that instead of emailing each one. So that's just another teacher trick that we learned to make life a little bit easier. And again, the tools are over here so that I can go in and I can set what works best for me when I'm reading. Now, what if I wanted to assign a book to my entire class? So if I go in and I decide, you know what, we're going to read The More Perfect Union because we're working on that book in our social studies class. So I've clicked on the book. I had already browsed it and I had put it in my Manage Audiobooks. I can see here a little synopsis of it. All of my book information is here. Over here on the right, I have a couple of choices. I can assign to the bookshelf or I can add to bookshelf. If I click add to bookshelf, it's going into my bookshelf. You see how it says here, this book is already on your bookshelf. If I'm going to assign to the bookshelf, it means I'm going to give it to the kids. So assign is giving it to the kids, add it is for me. So let's say that I want to assign this book to all of my students. Here is my one student that was in my grade book, and I can assign the book to her. If I have more kids, here are all the kids in the entire school. I can add this book to all of their bookshelves, or I can just pick and say, you know what, I only want my 11th graders to read this book. So just those kids are going to get this book. And I can use the sorting features over here if it's just a particular grade that I want to work with. A lot of times I try to keep this on my students because my students will help me do this for not just one of my kids, but for all the kids that I may have in my class. Then I'm just going to click Assign Books. And now this book is going to end up in the bookshelf for my students. And they'll see a little message that says that book has been added. Questions, comments, concerns so far? All righty.
I have a quick question for the group.
Sure.
How many of you are part of that management system that you actually help in your district push out the Learning Ally to students? Can you sort of put it in the chat or just open your mic up, Sherry? Sherry obviously said that she's part of it, huh?
Yeah, I'm part of that. We've been working hard as a district with Marta, narrowing down those titles that our district is very knowing that we should not have out there for certain groups. So Marta's been helpful, but luckily it kind of gotten taken off my plate as truly the administrator, because we have a person in our district who is managing all the media centers and the book selections there. So he took on that role, which was unbelievable. So, but yeah, I think we've made great progress with the help of Marta. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate that. So, it's wonderful how you can really find people who want to just work together to make sure that we're doing what we need to do for the kids. There are always going to be some restrictions that we may have from particular, powers that be. It may be the district lawyers, and whatever we can do to help you mitigate through those situations in terms of what can we do on our end, how can we help facilitate this, because we all have that same goal that we talked about in the beginning. We all want to make those kids skilled readers. When you think about your kids, I'm in Tampa, Florida. So my kids grew up in the Florida system. I hadn't told you guys yet, but the oldest is an art teacher here in the city of Tampa. And the youngest just graduated, and she's a first grade teacher here in the city of Tampa, Hillsborough County. So we really believe in education. Don't think I didn't try to talk them out of it, because I did, because, my husband and I will be poor the rest of our lives. But, it is something that their response to me was, Mom, you've done it for over 30 years. It can't be that bad. And it is, there's so many joys in education, but sometimes we have so many barriers and so many hoops. So if I can get on with you guys for 30 minutes and help you through a hoop, I will get on and help you through a hoop. Whatever's going to make life just a little bit easier for you, because we already have enough on our plate as educators. So as we go through, we've talked about what this looks like when you're in the system. We've talked about how we have the different library curation. So the one thing that we do want to look at is, how are we going to measure whether or not the kids are using this, and what does success look like? So for some kids, in my scenario, success is, oh my God, they opened a book. That was, for me, that was a success sometimes in my classroom. For, excuse me, for other students, success is, wow, you have been reading for 20 minutes a day for at least 33 days. Why do we pick those random numbers, 20 minutes a day for about 30 or 33 days? Because it means they're developing a habit. So in our system, we call that reading with frequency. We're trying to change it to reading with success, because we feel that if you can create a habit of reading, then we are looking at success. These are kids that sometimes will not even pick up a book. I used to have one in my classroom that would sit there with the book like this. And at one point, I thought I was going to have to tell him, you realize it's upside down, because all he was doing was just sitting there with the book in his face. So if we can get these kids to create that habit of getting in there and reading, and if this facilitates that for them so that they're not struggling, then we need to figure out a way of how we can do that. We have to also figure out how we can leverage our parents to do that. We can tell them about Learning Ally. I do have bilingual informational sheets that I can share with you so that we can tell our parents, hey, I know sometimes it can be a struggle. For me personally, as a Spanish speaker, my brain sometimes thinks in English and is trying to speak in Spanish, or the opposite, and it doesn't work. I've learned that that's not called Spanglish, which is what I used to call it. It's called translanguaging. But so sometimes we're in environments where there's some confusion, and I may not be able to count on an adult to help me with things. For myself growing up, I was the one that used to help my parents with their forms and with how they spelled things. And that may be the scenario for some of our students. So if we can have a student sitting next to a parent and they're both listening to the book, and they're both being able to go through this process, one, the connection that they're building, but two, we may be able to help a parent while we're doing this. So thinking about how we can bring those parents into the situation. And sometimes as a parent, I may have gotten home from work at 5 o'clock and I don't have time to read to my kid. I've got to make dinner. So I'm going to sit her at the kitchen counter and I'm going to have her turn on that audiobook and we're both going to listen to that book while I'm cutting up the stuff that I need to make dinner. So sometimes we have to multitask with our students. If that's what it takes, I say go for it. You know, we just want them in there and we want them reading. I do also want you guys to know that there are certain parts of our grant that allow us to not just do the one-to-ones, we can do rapid launches with groups of educators in your school district. We can, see about doing, if we need to, individual school assistants. Let's say that I know sometimes I have very large districts where high schools like, look, we have a huge ESE population. Is there something you can do for us like after school, just for our school? Because we've got a ton of new teachers. So if there's anything that comes up, please feel free to email me. We can work on this individually so that it really helps your teachers as much as possible while not putting an extra burden on anyone during the school day. So there have been times that we do like office hours after school so that if anybody wants to log in, they can log in and we can work through things with them while we're in the system. The other things that we offer through, and so I'm just going to list our resources here for you. The other things that we offer through our grant as a discretionary project is also some brain-based literacy instruction courses. They are asynchronous. As a school administrator, I would have used this for my PLCs. I would have said, you know what, we're going to do this for our PLCs. Everybody's going to go home and watch Unit 1, go through it, look at all the different aspects of it. When we get together as a faculty, we're going to talk about how this can work at our school with our kids. So I would definitely suggest that if this is something that your district, some districts signed up for this back in June, and we already have their tickets available and we'll be sending those out in the next week or so. Some districts did not have an opportunity to take advantage of that, but it will be coming up. So please make sure that at your district, they're looking for those emails. The other thing that we have is in the summer, we have a special Spotlight on Dyslexia conference. This summer, we actually had a big conversation about the science of reading, because one of the things as a company that is nationwide, one of the things that we've come to find out is that I myself have seen, is that not every state teaches the same way. So, for example, we do phonics in the state of Florida. There are some states that have not taught phonics in a while. So those different types of conversations came up. What we did as a discretionary grant is we had our liaison go through and they flagged everything that was Florida supportive of the best standards. So anything that was part of that conversation that came up, or excuse me, part of that conference that came up was part of the Florida track. So there is access to that. We will be doing that again next June. And normally you have access to those things for about 6 months. The brain-based learning is a 1-year access that you would have. And for any administrators, we're looking at potentially doing an administrator-only conference on dyslexia in December. And that would also have a Florida track. Questions, comments, concerns, because I am going to maybe let you go early if it's okay with Tara.
Don't hit that exit button yet.
No, because I have one big gem for you here. So because we all partner as discretionary projects, I think it's highly important for you guys to know New Worlds Reading. They are some of our partners. I know they partner with you guys. We all see each other at conferences. And I was able to speak with Dr. Dugan last week to find out, hey, you guys are still doing that free book thing, right? So, yes, not only are they still doing that free book thing, they have expanded down to VPK. So now, from VPK all the way through fifth grade, students who are eligible can get a free physical book. So you can use the New Worlds QR code that's there, and you can tell your families about this as well. We've got to be able to just make sure that we're all out there sharing anything that's free as much as possible, because our budgets are tight. And if we can get something extra for our kids that we don't have to pay for, we need to make sure we get it.
And
So-
Marta, the New Worlds Reading is family driven, right? They sign up themselves and things like that.
Yes. Yes. So all you have to do is just get that information out there to your families. So coming full circle, as we talked about my why in dyslexia, you've come to find out that my other why is because I have a kid with dyslexia. And this poor kid, her dyscalculia is off the charts. 50% of the time she transposes numbers, shapes, and symbols. So she had a challenge trying to pass the math portion of the teacher educator assessment. And she refused to request services, which absolutely drives me nuts. But, what do I know? I've only been in education for 30 years, so she doesn't listen to me. But she finally passed it. And she said the same thing that a lot of our kids say when they have different disabilities. She said, why am I so stupid that I can't pass this test? And like I told her, and like we tell every single one of our kids who say that, you're not stupid. Your brain just works a little differently. When she finally passed it, my response to her was, think, now when your kids don't pass a test, you can tell them, you know what? I worked really, really hard and it took me several tries, but I was able to pass the test. So if I can do it, I know you can also, because our kids they will reach every bar that we set for them. It doesn't matter how high or how low we set it. They will at least try to get it. And they're only going to reach a high bar if we set a high bar. That is my spiel. I will stay off my soapbox. If you need any help, again, please feel free to give me a buzz. I'm available. That is my office number. So normally it'll go straight to voicemail because I'm in different sessions like this throughout the day, but you can leave a voicemail and I will be more than happy to give you a call back. You can always catch me via email as well. Thank you also, Melissa. I really appreciate that you guys were willing to give up your time this afternoon, which I know is very valuable and very limited. And I just want to say thank you so much for choosing to spend it here with us.
I would like to open the floor up to any participants that might have that last minute question for Marta. If you have any questions, please raise your hand or go ahead and open your mic up. And as we're transitioning from that, if you would just take a minute and complete the survey or evaluation for us so that we can let Marta know how she scored. No, we want to hear your feedback. It's really important to us and it only takes a few minutes. So please do that. If you don't have your QR code reader, here's the link, the long link to the evaluation survey as well. And our next virtual learning and you will be coming up September 5th, and that will be the switch skills level 1 progression, starting off the series. And Dr. Danilyn Workentine has definitely added a very unique component to it by providing you the tips and tricks to the strategies to each of those progression skills that you learned last spring. So if you're just revving up, look onto that events page, go ahead and register, and more information is going to be there as well. So if there's no other questions, I want to big thank you, round of applause for Dr. Rodriguez and Pozo being able to give us just the support and the resources and the information we know in order to carry on what we do throughout the day. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Pozo. I really appreciate it. So
Thank you. And thank you guys again for being here. And Tara, as always, I love partnering with you guys. Janet is great.
we just have a great team. We have great participants, and we just like to help spread the word so our students are successful. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Bye, everybody. As you finish your survey, you can go ahead and log off. Have a great week.